Now, while this program has been all about how to be a great listener, and we've talked about a few listening rules, there are some listening rules you can break, and we need to know when we should break them. Sometimes even the best listeners will find it wise to break the rule of not interrupting. The best time to interrupt is when someone is being overly aggressive, rude, or disrespectful. One technique for dealing with such a difficult person is to simply let them blather on until they run out of steam. However, sometimes what they are saying is so rude that letting them continue is unacceptable. And when this happens, a technique you can use is boundary statements. A boundary statement has 3 parts: acknowledgement, willingness, and conditionality. And it may sound something like this. This is important and I want to talk about it. There's your acknowledgement and your willingness. Not this way. This is important and I want to talk about it. Not this way. Not this way is your conditionality. Now you might need to repeat this a few times. However, eventually they will figure out that their behavior is getting them nowhere. You might even need to use an advanced version, boundary statements plus a consequence. This is important and I want to talk about it, not this way, and I'll be ending this conversation if there's not a change. While using these boundary statements violates the rules of listening, it is worth it if you're training that difficult person how to treat you. Another situation where you may need to break a listening rule is when the speaker brings up a topic of conversation that is so very far outside of the scope of the current conversation as to be a waste of people's time. For example, you might be running a meeting and someone asks a question or makes a comment about something that has nothing to do with the agenda, and it doesn't add value or make good use of time. In this instance, while you aren't necessarily going to interrupt them, you may opt to break the rule of fully engaging them or taking the time to have a conversation. In this case, you may wish to let them know that you can discuss this issue privately or add it to next week's agenda, or that you're willing to talk about it after the meeting. As long as it's done graciously, most people will still feel respected. Another time to break the be fully engaged in listening rule is when someone is so unclear as to what they are trying to communicate that attempting to clarify or fully engage them is genuinely useless. They don't know what they're trying to communicate. This may be due to them not having their emotions under control, or not having thought something through, or reacting to a situation as opposed to responding to it. Whatever the reason, some people are so scattered that it is not only in our best interest, it is in their best interest for us to use a technique I referenced earlier: acknowledge and reschedule. When you acknowledge and reschedule, it sounds something like this. Hey, this is important and I'd like to give you my undivided attention. I'm not able to do that right now. Let's get together at, and you offer a time. Now, a crucial part of this is to acknowledge. It's important because it validates them. And it's also important to let them know what's in it for them. Give you my undivided attention. You want to know if they go away and come back later, it's going to be good for them. And this is beneficial because it does indeed give people the chance to go away and to rethink or calm down or to organize their thoughts, all while saving face. Perhaps the number one time and reason to break the rules of effective listening is when you're dealing with a toxic person. We all know a toxic person. They're the constant whiners, complainers, the negative Nellies. They're walking black clouds of misery, and they want to suck you right down with them because misery loves company. I'm not suggesting you're mean or rude or nasty to the toxic person. However, when they're being toxic, the last thing we want to do is encourage them or engage with them. Often the toxic person is looking for someone to listen and someone who will commiserate. Many of us know that one of the hallmarks of a great communicator is the ability to empathize. However, we want to make sure that we don't confuse empathy with commiseration. When we commiserate, we are literally being miserable with them. That's what co-miserate means, and they like it. When I'm approached by a toxic person, I do whatever I can to keep the conversation short and to not engage. There's an old adage that goes, what gets rewarded gets repeated. Stop rewarding the toxic person by actively listening to them. You can't make a toxic person not be toxic. However, you can stop rewarding their toxic behavior, and they will learn not to be toxic with you because it's not rewarding for them. Listening is one of the most important skill sets a professional possesses. I believe we all know how to be good listeners, but we often choose not to because of ego. I will reiterate what I shared earlier. Most of us do not have a listening problem. We have an ego problem. Once we get our egos in check, we can then use the active listening tools shared here to improve our relationships, productivity, results, and effectiveness both at work and at home. I encourage you to ask yourself, where can I improve? What tools can I use more often? Remember, knowledge absorbed is knowledge. Knowledge applied is wisdom. You are now ready to apply your knowledge and be a better listener.